So, I just got done watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I really liked it. Now I know I haven't watched Ant-Man 3 Quantumania yet, but I'm saving that for you guys. I'm gonna watch it and react to it for the first time with you guys in the next video. Me watching Guardians 3 kind of just came along by chance because my friends wanted to go see it with me, so I went. Sorry, you won't get a reaction to this movie, but you will get a review. And surprise, surprise, a Guardians of the Galaxy movie directed by James Gunn actually turned out to be pretty good. But seriously, after a whole phase of the MCU that was either hit or miss with the nicest of opinions and just the death of the MCU with the harshest of opinions. But let's just say that after a whole phase of MCU movies not being very impressive or memorable, for a lot of people, this is the one that really scratched the itch that's been with the Marvel audience since Endgame. This is the one that has gotten near universal praise and has made a lot of MCU fans happy. Something that I haven't really seen since Endgame. I mean, I guess Spider-Man No Way Home also kind of did it, but I mean, I feel like it kind of cheated because it brought back like every single Spider-Man character in cinematic history, so people were going to like that no matter what. I feel like this is the one that on its own merits, and as a typical normal MCU movie, this is the one that everybody thought was really good. I honestly think if this movie was bad, it probably would have been the final nail in the coffin for Marvel, because nobody would have any faith in the MCU anymore if they couldn't get a Guardians movie right. Along with Spider-Man, the Guardians are probably like the easiest characters to get a good movie out of. They're just movies about a group of colorful misfits who have a bunch of zany, wacky, crazy adventures out in space. Like, that's going to be fun no matter what. It's really hard to get that wrong. And while this movie does have that, it's also surprisingly deep and emotional, but I'll talk about all that stuff in a bit. The characters are also done really well in this movie. Like, this is some of the best character development I've seen in a while from the MCU, and maybe part of that is owed to the fact that this is the last Guardians movie, so a lot of these characters have to go out in ways that are satisfying and give a sense of closure, but even the characters that don't have closing character arcs, that were always just sort of to the side, like Cosmo the dog, have more to do in this movie than in any of the Guardians movies before this. The main villain of this movie is also fantastic. Apparently, this actor was also in another superhero property with Peacemaker, and he was supposedly great in that too. This movie is also pretty funny, which shouldn't be too surprising. Like, it's actually legitimately funny because it's got that signature Guardians humor that was also like the funniest part of Infinity War.
What master do you serve? What master do I serve? What am I supposed to say, Jesus?
Sometimes, though, the humor didn't always land. Like, don't get me wrong, the cringy, awkward, childish, juvenile Marvel humor that has plagued so many movies before this is still in this movie. Drax makes a really weird joke about butts and pooping, and there were just a couple of jokes that felt like they went on for too long, that it made things feel really awkward, and not in a funny way, but more in like a, why are they talking like this? Who wrote that line kind of way. The CGI and special effects also didn't seem that bad. A lot of it is visually really pretty and colorful, and compared to some of the stuff I've seen in the past phase, there was nothing that leapt out at me that looked really offensive. And this should not come as a surprise to anyone, but the music is phenomenal in this movie, as has been the case since the first Guardians movie. If there had to be something to really complain about with this movie, it would probably be the runtime. Honestly, looking at it before I watched it, 2.5 hours seemed like a good runtime for a fitting conclusion to the Guardians trilogy, but actually watching it in the moment, I got to a point where probably just past the 2-hour mark, I was starting to check out. It just felt a little too long, and even my friends felt it too, because they made a point of telling me that they were having trouble staying awake for that long. I mean, I specifically put my seat in an upright position to stay awake, and I was still feeling my eyelids getting heavy towards the end. I looked around the theater, and I'm pretty sure the people who reclined their seats all the way back actually did fall asleep at some point in the movie. It's not even like the pacing was bad. I don't remember any scenes that were unnecessarily long and boring, but the runtime, even if it was a runtime filled with fun stuff, was just too much. I mean, I'm pretty sure I was nodding a bit during a fight scene, and I love fight scenes, but it's just that this fight scene landed like just past that 2-hour mark where I started checking out. But beyond the story, characters, humor, special effects, soundtrack, and runtime, I don't really know what else I can talk about that won't go into super spoiler territory, so if you haven't watched the movie yet, I'm going to warn you now, I'm going to start spoiling parts of the movie. So the only thing for the rest of the video that isn't a spoiler will be my score, so skip to the very last seconds of the video if you want to know my score, because from this point on to the score, it's going to be all spoilers, alright? Here we go. So the movie starts out with the introduction of Adam Warlock, and ever since I heard he was going to be in the next Guardians movie, I was hyped. Adam Warlock played a really big part in the original Infinity Gauntlet storyline that Infinity War was based on, and I was kind of surprised that he wasn't introduced earlier. And when I say that he played a big part, I mean he played a big part. He was the guy who led the remaining Avengers against Thanos after the snap, and he was the one who used the Infinity Gauntlet to fix everything. And to be honest, I don't think I entirely like the way they did Adam Warlock in this movie. It just felt like they could have done so much more with him. His best scene is, in fact, that very first scene where he fights the Guardians, but it never really feels like he reaches that peak again for the rest of the movie. I really thought he would feel more like a significant character, given the fact that they teased his appearance in the post-credits scene of Guardians 2. So for him to feel like a tertiary antagonist is really disappointing to me. It seriously feels like he was just in this movie to help get the ball rolling in the beginning, and that was it. He was just there to ignite the main conflict of the movie. And speaking of the main conflict of the movie, this movie primarily focuses on the problem of Rocket dying after getting shot by Adam Warlock, and the Guardians have to find a way to save him. And I think the reason why they made this the plot was because we've pretty much seen every Guardians member's backstory besides Rocket. We saw Star-Lord's backstory at the beginning of Guardians 1, and Drax's backstory was alluded to in that movie as well. Gamora and Nebula's backstories were expanded upon with Thanos' introduction. That really only leaves Rocket and Groot, and we kind of saw Groot's entire life play out on screen, so Rocket was really the only one left. And he gets a whole ass movie dedicated to his backstory, but they needed to show flashes of his past in a way that was narratively appropriate, so of course they're going to put him on life support so they can show his life literally flashing before his eyes. And his backstory is basically one giant ASPCA commercial. And I think as soon as you put cute animals in your backstory, you're automatically going to get a very positive and sympathetic response. But that's Rocket's part of the story. The other side of the story concerns the rest of the Guardians as they try to find a way to save Rocket, stop the High Evolutionary, and Peter has a side thing where he's trying to rekindle his romance with Gamora. And the scene where they save Rocket is acted out really well. And to be honest, I was surprised that Rocket actually managed to survive to the end of this movie, because given the fact that this was the last Guardians movie, I thought they had to kill one of the Guardians for that extra emotional oomph. Kind of like how Endgame ended the Infinity Saga by killing Iron Man. Plus, I knew that in the Secret Wars comic book story, Rocket dies. And given that they're going to be adapting that story for a future Avengers movie in Phase 6, I thought it was a done deal. Rocket's death sentence was pretty much written. And I thought that quick shot from the trailer of Chris Pratt screaming was going to be that scene. But as it turned out, Rocket survived. But I'm just saying, if he had died, I would have been okay with it. I also really like the relationship between Peter Quill and Gamora in this movie, because the Gamora that exists in this movie is the 2014 version of Gamora that was still on Thanos' side and hadn't met the Guardians yet, and whose only interaction with the Guardians was in Endgame. So Peter spends the whole movie missing his Gamora, and when they finally reunite, Peter tries to tell Gamora of how she was going to be in her future and how they were in love in her future, but Gamora insists that that version of Gamora is not how she is right now, and Peter's version of her doesn't exist anymore, which only serves to anger Peter further and deepen his resentment towards her. Finally, by the end, Peter comes to accept that the girl that he once loved simply wasn't there anymore, and he wasn't doing any favors for himself or for her by hating her for not being the person he once knew. And honestly, I did not think they were going to go this route, because throughout the entire movie, up until the end, I kept asking myself how they were going to do things so that Quill and Gamora ended up back together, because that's what everybody expects in a movie, especially in a final installment like this, is that everyone gets their happy ending. And if it actually happened that way, I probably wouldn't be saying that I liked Quill and Gamora's relationship in this movie. But the fact that their relationship doesn't work out, and it doesn't work out in a way that's very realistic, realistic makes this whole story of Peter and Gamora's relationship fantastic. Because truth be told, sometimes relationships don't have happy endings. A lot of the time, people just end up falling out of love with each other because people change as time goes by. Yeah, that's sad, but it's normal. People are constantly changing, and sometimes the person that you might have loved at one point just isn't the same person anymore. And like I said before, you're not going to do yourself any favors or do that person any favors by trying to force that person to be who you remembered them to be. Sometimes it's just better to let them go. In the end, Gamora tells Peter, "I bet we were fun," and that is such a powerful line because while it's heartbreaking that things between the two aren't as good now, there's also some comfort in the fact that there were a lot of good memories between the two. And that's the thing, is that it's okay to look back fondly on good memories with a person, but you can't just force that person to be someone who they're not anymore. Whoa, when the fuck did this turn into therapy hour? But Peter and Gamora go their separate ways, with Peter returning to Earth and Gamora rejoining the Ravagers, which is effectively her new family. Mantis goes off on a spiritual journey to find herself. Nebula and Drax, who takes his role as a father back up again after his family was killed. Nebula and Drax stay on Nowhere to raise the children that they rescued from the High Evolutionary. And Rocket takes over as leader of the new Guardians of the Galaxy, which now consists of him, Groot, Cosmo the dog, Kraglin, Adam Warlock and his pet, and one of the rescued children that they took with them. So the Guardians may actually be back for another installment, just with a bunch of voice actors, which will probably be much easier on the actors, as voice actors obviously don't have to sit in makeup for hours on end. And we also still have 3 real-life actors who haven't gotten tired of their parts yet. And we get a post-credits scene telling us that Peter Quill will return as the legendary Star-Lord in more Marvel movies in the future, and as a person who never understood all the hate for a guy who literally has never said or done anything offensive towards anyone, that is all right by me. All in all, I would say this is a pretty satisfying conclusion to the Guardians of the Galaxy as we once knew them. All the original Guardians got pretty satisfying closing arcs, or if they wanted to return, they're definitely able to. Honestly, I don't have too much to complain about for this one. This one's just solid. Maybe we should change that for the next video. 8.5 out of 10. Good movie.